Hi, welcome to this week's virtual assembly from the King John School. I'm Mr. Spencer and my assembly today is on our local community history, local area history. We'll be tackling the questions of the origin of Essex, the origin of Benfleet, and indeed the origin of Fundersley as well. So let's look at the origin of Essex. Essex was an Anglo-Saxon territory. It originated from the Anglo-Saxons, the East Saxons or the East Seacs, and it was in the first king of Essex, or the first East Saxon king, was in 527 AD, and that was Escevine. King Escevine got his name. It's linked to, translated, it's Ashtree, or you could take that a step further and look at the friendly king, the strong friendly king. Escevine was the first king of Essex. We're going to now take a look at the area of Essex. So the area of Essex goes from, if you went back into London and you got the River Lee, east of the River Lee coming out to Essex would be the end of Essex, if you like, and then that would border up on the north side of the Thames. So Kent had its own territories and people, and Essex had the East Saxons coming into Essex. We're going to look at also now the origins of Benfleet and how the Battle of Benfleet turned out. From the 5th century, Benfleet was known as Benfleet. It's kind of an idea of the streams and the creeks that are coming into Benfleet. So the Benfleet Creek, as you know it. So Benfleet or Benfleet is kind of a wooded creek. So that's how the name of the area derived, the wooded creek. With Fundersley, it was slightly different. So the Saxon god of thunder was Thundor, and Thundor called Fundersley, again L-E-Y, Lee, same as Lee on sea. A lee is like a clearing, a meadow, and that was where Fundersley got its name. So it was named after the Saxon god of thunder, Thunor, and then you've got Lee, the meadow, the opening. So there we get the idea of Fundersley coming from the Saxon god Thundor. Just as a side note and something else to think about is when you're travelling around or the actual area you live in, is to think about the names of where you are. Say for instance Leon Sea, the meadow or the clearing on the sea. If you think of Thorpe Bay, anything with Thorpe in it would be seen as a Viking territory. So Scunthorpe, Thorpe Bay would be seen as that. You've also got Ham. So a lot of people here came from the East End, West Ham, East Ham and so on. Ham was like a fortification. It was like a fenced area. Also, you could say it was a village as well. So it's always something to be aware of, is when you're walking around, where you move, where you live, the streets that you live in. Have a look at the name of it and see, can you find out, if it's not one that I've mentioned, can you find out where that name of that street, or indeed a name of a person, the carpenter, the smith and so on, coming back from the Anglo-Saxon and the Middle Ages. So let's have a look at the Battle of Benfleet. The Battle of Benfleet took place between the Vikings and the Saxons in 894. The Thames made the area vulnerable to Viking attacks. In 894, Benfleet was used by the Vikings as a base. If England was to be saved, this trouble spot must be taken back by the Saxons. King Alfred, the King of Essex at the time, and his son Edward the Elder, and the remains of his English army, together with many Londoners, as Edward could raise, came to destroy the Viking camp at Benfleet. The story of the expedition, the story of the battle, is given in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, in which the name Benfleet comes up for the first time. This would then give Benfleet its first recognition of being a place in England, in Essex, in East Saxon at the time. It's putting Benfleet on the map. The Vikings were defeated. The Vikings were defeated by King Alfred, his army led by his son Edward the Elder, and with the help of Ethelred of Mercia. Mercia being a county just north of Essex, which now we may look at as being in the Midlands. Subsequently to the defeat of the Vikings, a church was built in Benfleet as a thanksgiving for the victory over the Vikings. The church was built in the area that now St Mary's Church sits. So St Mary's Church has its own history, but in the 9th, 10th centuries there was a different church there. A church built for the thanksgiving of the defeat of the Vikings at the Battle of Benfleet. I've now come back behind the walls of Hadley Castle to briefly talk about the history of the castle, when it was built, why it was first built, and also the purpose over time of the castle, how it was used and how it became decayed. In 1215, King John was the King of England. King John famously had dispute with the barons, and then in 1215 the Magna Carta was signed. One baron loyal to King John was Hubert de Burgh. Hubert de Burgh was granted Hadley by King John as a reward for supporting King John. The castle was built in 1227. The castle, de Burgh, it gave him the wealth. It was an economically viable area. It showed the power that he had, but importantly as well, it was a defence mechanism for the country. By this time the Viking raids had ended and dwindled off, but now from Europe England were facing raids from France. In 1239 de Burgh had fallen out with the then King Henry III. De Burgh had to forfeit all of his land, including Hadley Castle. The castle then went into a period of neglect. This was compounded with subsidence, and it wasn't until the end of the reign of Edward III that the castle was cared for again and lived in. Hadley Castle was renovated and repaired during the reign of Edward III. Later in his reign, he sought to cement his achievements in stone and built the Queensborough Castle just across the Thames in Kent. In 1360, a new gateway was built, along with a barbican. The residential quarters of the castle were updated and upgraded. Edward III spent a significant part of his later life at Hadley Castle. It was a castle that the king favoured. When Edward III died in 1377, little interest was placed on Hadley Castle. It did, though, periodically become a package of royal properties owned by the Queen of England. Catherine of Aragon, Anne of Cleves and Catherine Parr were the three queens, wives of Henry VIII, that used Hadley Castle as somewhere to stay. However, even though three famous English queens had stayed here, by the mid-16th century, Hadley Castle was ruinous, sold off to be used for building materials. England was changing. The monarchy was changing. I hope you've enjoyed this brief insight into your local history. If there's anything further you want to know, then please don't hesitate to ask. But why don't you go out there, research something? You've got over 1,000 years of history in your local area, all different types of history. So maybe it'd be great if you went out, done some research and let us know what you'd found out. Keep alert, stay safe, goodbye.